I hear them coming near, their heart it beats with fear. They say my name in shame. My words they were abused, my healing they misused, and now I stand accused. They came to light the flame, they came to watch me hang and burn my gifts away. But once the smoke's removed, my body's been abused. My soul is watching you. My sisters, we have come, the old and ancient ones, return to bring anew. We won't go in your flame, no, none of us will hang. Our voices we reclaim. The burned witches come, gather everyone, and hear what we do say.
Welcome to Burnt Witches, a limited series podcast where history rises from the ashes and comes back to you in a modern way. Here we will discuss all things labeled magical, esoteric, spiritual, or the broadwash label woo. Looking to dispel myths, we will meet brave souls who came here to help, heal, and educate. But first, a step back in time, as this show is dedicated to the Italian philosopher Pietro Giabano. He died in prison between 1315 and 1316. They actually don't have his exact date on records. And Pietro held doctorates in philosophy and medicine. He studied for 20 years in Constantinople and later traveled and worked in Paris. He was celebrated for his contributions to the study and practice of medicine and philosophy. He wrote many books sharing all of his knowledge. But Pietro then moved into the occult sciences, studying and writing on geomancy and palmistry, where this led him into physics and astrology. It was these studies that gained him a reputation among scholars, and he was introduced to all the popes of his time. His mastery of astrology is shown by the astronomical figures he had painted in the great hall of the Palace of Padua, his translations of the books of the great learned Rabbi Abraham Aben Ezra, his own multiple books on the critical days of the awakening of philosophy and astrology, his book on the improvement of astronomy. But it wasn't until Pedro, his wealth began to grow. After all of these years of amassing this information and helping others and educating and teaching and writing books and practicing medicine and meeting with popes and meeting with dignitaries, it was when his wealth began to grow that the rumors started. Rumors of black magic from his belief in astrology. It is stated that any money he paid out would be magically paid back to him. These stories brought the attention of the Dominican monastery in Paris, where he was brought on charges of witchcraft and heresy. He was first acquitted, then later charged of denying the existence and influence of spirits and demons. He died in prison awaiting this verdict. So they burned him in effigy. And 40 years later, all of his books were put on trial. They even exhumed him, brought his body back up from the grave, and burned him and his books along with it to prove the point. And so this podcast is dedicated to the life of Pietro di Abano and his willingness to question, search for more, help his fellow man, have an open mind, and try to help progress the society. And we're going to enter in a trivia question that will be answered later for everyone. Just think about this as the show continues. What was the witch's mark? This mark is what helped prove guilt or innocence in many of the witch trials in Europe and in the Americas. So we'll look at those answers later on. But right now, I'm so happy to introduce Tiffany Harelik, a beautiful psychic medium and astrologer. So welcome to the show, Tiffany.
Thank you, Abby. I'm so happy to be here with you talking about exactly this in exactly this moment in time.
You know, it was these stories and these people, when you really start delving into the history of them and you see the common thread of many of them, they were very well educated humans and they were just questioning. They're questioning the norm. They were questioning their environment. They were just wanting to understand, on many of them on a scientific, but also on a soul level, of the great questions that we all ask. You know, why are we here?
Why are we here?
Why are we here? So often, if that brought success into their lives, or if it made people feel uncomfortable, unfortunately, in our human history, that led to a lot of people being ended early.
Mm-hmm.
And just imagine that wealth of knowledge that went into the ground with them that could have continued.
Yeah, and that does continue, right? Through our practices of looking up at the skies and looking inward in our hearts. And it's, you know, there are some mysteries that are better left unanswered, right? Because we are on this quest for truth and we're on this quest for spiritual meaning and significance. And, you know, there are those of us who have had near-death experiences, things like this that really you get a different spiritual awakening that's different than what's taught. And so it's not that you necessarily even want to question, but your experience has shown you that it's just different than what has been taught all of these years. So, you know, we are definitely in an astrological period of awakening. And I love that you brought Pietro up, and I love that we're able to have the freedom to talk about these things. So I'm so excited to get into the conversation with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and it's us having these strong voices that will continue this energy forward. So, all right, let's get a little bit more into you, Tiffany. Obviously, we know your name, Tiffany Harelik. We like to know, and I ask this question because you understand astrology, you understand energy, and there is a grid around our planet. So I ask everyone, where are you from and where are you located now?
Okay, I am from Austin, Texas. I'm still located in Austin, Texas. I'm 42. I offer my practice both from Austin and then out in the country in Cisco, Texas. And so I go back and forth quite frequently. I love to get out of the city. I love to be in the city. But right now I'm in a nomadic lifestyle. And so Austin really is where I had my first ghost experience. Right when I was 3, we moved into a new house on Halloween on October 31st in 1982. I was actually 2 turning 3, and the bed fell, and the bed, like, I had this old iron bed, and I had this, you know, upstairs room with this window seat that overlooked all the trees. And the first night on Halloween, the bed fell, and I was like, oh, it's, you know, I can see the ghosts here. I can, you know, they're here. And when you try to tell your parents that, it's like, okay, but ever since then, I've had this hypersensitivity to energy, right? To energy that's not mine. And because it was unexplained, I think that put me at least on an early quest for explaining the extra energy in the room. But Austin is really for me where it all started.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, when we hear, the show is called Burnt Witches, and we've discussed witchcraft, but really it's magic. We really look at that word magic, and I would love to know, what does that word mean to you when you hear it?
For me, it's all about synchronicity. I have full body chills when I talk about magic and synchronicity. To me, synchronicity and magic is really that awareness of coincidences that aren't coincidences, of saying something that really means something to somebody. The ancient Egyptians practiced their magic in the morning. And for me, it's much like that. I really take a long morning. For me, my personal magic work is very yin, very feminine. I like to light candles. I like to have sweet songs. That's a very important part. I like to be on my knees and be bowing and be in devotion to something that's greater than myself. And I like to do something that's pleasurable in the morning, right? And that can mean many different things, whether that's physical or whether it's, getting out and feeding the birds first thing, being of service first thing, just making sure my heart is in the right place to prepare for all the magic and synchronicity that's available in this day, right? This best day ever, this moment in time. So for me, magic can mean many things. Of course, it's fun to think about astrology and working with the moon cycles and all of that. And I do work with the moon cycles. The way that I work with the moon cycles is, I think, different than how we were taught 20 years ago or so. And so instead of working with the moon cycle as just like a monthly situation, I'm looking at it over a 27-month cycle, a 2.5-year cycle. And so what starts with a new moon will play out over the course of those 2.5 years. And if I could try to be brief with that, what that really looks like is, if you have a new moon in a particular sign, right? If you have a new moon in Taurus, well, 9 months later, you're going to have a first quarter moon in Taurus. Did I do that backwards? Yes, I did that backwards. And then 9 months later, you're going to have a full moon. And then 9 months later, you're going to have a last quarter moon. And so over the course of 2.5 years, you're going to play out all of the phases of that moon in that sign. Okay, so in the course of a month, it's a little different. But if you expand out and you zoom out, right? And that's the gift of astrology, and the magic of astrology is that you can see that over this large amount of time, we're in this little tiny part of it. And so astrology lets us look backward and forward to be able to see how the magic plays out for us, right? And to be able to see these patterns and signs and synchronicities and spiritual signposts. And so, there are other things I do in terms of magic work. I am a beekeeper, and so I keep honey and wax, and I make these really fun tinctures, and I make it part of my magical practice to incorporate crystals and incorporate the sun and incorporate Mercury, because bees are Mercurian. They're ruled by Virgo, the sign Virgo. So those are little bits and pieces. Is that what you had in mind, or?
Absolutely, that was great. I mean, I just had so many thoughts. So, how you first started saying about how your magic works best in the morning.
Mhm.
I mean, even outside of the esoteric world, just straight modern thinkers and influencers and success coaches will tell you, it is how you start your day is what differentiates people who are successful in their life and people who are not successful. It's those routines and how you start the day. And they even say there's been a huge study coming out recently. I mean, people, you can see them on the TikTok videos, they're all posting them there, that the earlier you start your day leads to greater success as well.
Well, I'm all over that, because spirit wakes me up at like 3, and it's getting kind of old. But I'm really glad you said that, because I needed to hear it personally, because I do wake up so early, and it's those quiet hours of meditation when it's still dark out that I have the most feeling of connection. So I'm really glad you told me that.
And that's what they're saying. You nailed the head on it. on the, you nail the head on the head. You hit the nail on the head. I'll get there eventually. It's having that time for yourself in the morning, because in today's society, we fill it with so many to-do lists, so many other people's energies walking into our space, whether they're at work or family or home or after work, after school activities with the children and the pets. But if you can have those early morning hours or even 30 minutes of just being with yourself, with your own heart and your own mind, then you can clear, I want to say, like, clear, spirit showing me a sign of clearing the table, right? And you can see what you need to get done. But I also want to bring in, because you brought in the 27-month cycle and how that's in cycle of nines. And then it even goes into the beekeeping as well. This all deals with sacred geometry. It's all science and math. And even Pietro, as I was looking over my notes, the astronomical figures are what's painted, what was celebrated, and understanding that this is just math.
Yeah, when people are like, I don't believe in astrology, I'm like, okay, do you believe in the sun coming up every day? I mean, do you believe in the changing of seasons? Because that's all it is. We're just looking at the clock in the sky and making informed interpretations of how over time, over the history of ancient, lookers uppers of the skies have interpreted these exact motions, right? There's so many things that are easily predictable by astrology, and it's because of that kind of clockwork nature of things, that sacred geometry that comes through the different orbits. And what's so cool is that you can study it from different lenses, right? There's the Babylonian astrologers, there's the Indian astrologers, there's Chinese astrologers, there's Native American, Western, Islamic, Irish, Jewish, European astrologers. We're all looking at the same sky differently with a different language, but it still informs us in this great, beautiful clock in the sky. So
it's the common language, right?
Yeah.
I mean, mathematics is the universal language. And you bring up another point. This has been studied across time, across cultures, when civilizations, they didn't have the internet like we do today. So they weren't connected with each other, but they still felt this soul call to look up and to start making mathematical I don't want to say assumptions, but looking at and seeing how it reflects back onto our lives. There's a lot of mirrors in life. And so when you look at the sky, it's reflecting back onto you, and how is that impacting you? And so it's crossed all of those cultural differences, those cultural boundaries over time.
And it's the same thing, right? As above, so below. First, do no harm. That's all,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to shift for a minute, because I love where this is going, but I want to go a little bit back into, so when did you first notice? I know that you said that when you were 3, when did you first notice that I want to say that you had heightened abilities, or there were, your sensory perception was a little bit more tuned in than those around you?
I mean, I think that early example is the best, but I have a couple other fun stories. Around that time too, there was a moment when I was playing outside. I had a playground, sandbox, stuff outside in the backyard, and I was playing with a snake. It was red and yellow kill a fellow. It was that one. The coral, is it the coral snake? And the dog was barking. We had a white lab. He was going nuts. And my parents were like, shut up, dog, right? Like, she's fine. Well, when they eventually came out, because he wouldn't stop barking, I'm in the sandbox with this snake, like, yay! You know what I mean? Like, nothing's wrong. And what I guess why I bring that up is because one of my favorite yogis, Sharon Gannon, she writes many great books, but one of them starts out with a similar story where she's got this coral snake and she can hear it whispering, and she's just like having this conversation with this snake. And of course, an adult comes by and kills it, because there's, fear and concern where you've got poisonous snakes and kids. But there was a sensitivity to the animal world for me that was very different. I was always really good with animals. You know, I rode horses. I was very connected with our dogs and our cats and all of the pets. And to me, that is common with people that are very sensitive to energy, because it's all about whispering, you know, it's that soul whisper that you can communicate with another being. You know, there are other stories I could tell you. I had this experience when I was maybe 7 or 8. I was at my grandmother's house, and I had the coolest grandmother in the world. She was an oil painter. She smoked cigarettes every morning, and you know, she didn't like make me get up. And at night, she would watch all of the UFO and Bigfoot shows, which I still love to watch today. But I remember being at her house and having this experience when I was really quite young, 7, 8, of astral travel. And I didn't know what that was. There was no language around that. But I had this experience of just kind of falling asleep, and then all of a sudden being like shot out into space and being able to look down and having an understanding that we don't die. And that's an unusual thing for a kid that isn't instructed to believe that way, to experience. And I think it was a nice setup by spirit to then, as I had a near-death experience when I was 14 through a car wreck, to be on the other side and to see that and to feel comforted by it instead of afraid of it. And that's a powerful thing when you're not afraid of death, you know. It's a powerful thing for you personally, and it's a scary thing for people around you that are afraid of death. But it's what the yogis practice, right? In Shavasana, laying down, corpse pose, right? Relaxing into that space of darkness. And I just started experiencing that much earlier. You know, and of course, being at school, right? Like being at school and seeing things, hearing things that people weren't, or like being around some of the adults in the 80s growing up. I'm not talking about my parents or my family. I'm just saying in general, the adults like at school or wherever, where the vibe, like they're saying one thing, but the energy is not that. And you know it, right? Like you just can't bullshit me, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
knowing that as a little kid, I felt very old soul. I felt very old. I felt very wise, because I'm like, they're saying this, but they're not meaning that. And, you know, being able to just kind of intuit things, say things that were coming true for people, all of that was very young for me.
So you mentioned being around the adults and having an awareness of an old soul. So often when you look at people with these abilities, and when you're looking at the witch folklore about how it's the bloodline, is there anyone in your family that you can pinpoint that this was inherited through? Can you see that line?
Well, I do believe that it is a genetic inheritance, that is physical, you know, to be able to work with the afterlife, right? And so I think that in my family, I had both sides of that. And I think that that there was a fear around it that was really shut down. And so I know that in terms of my mom, I know that she had a reading when I was still quite young, and somebody told her in that reading that she burned at the stake, that she was a witch. She's an Aries. She had some good fire energy to her. And it was like, whoa, you know, like this was the first time we were even talking about this. Again, this is like 80s, you know, this is early. My Russian ancestors, all of the European Jewish side of my family absolutely have some of that gypsy lore story of not being able to practice, you know, the intuitive arts, if you will. And so, and then even in my family now, you know, I probably shouldn't be, I don't want to out anybody, but there are people in my family that are younger, the kids that are incredibly, incredibly gifted, like far exceeding my gifts, that are just beyond, right? Beyond, beyond, beyond. And so I just love to watch it unfold through the family lines. Did I answer your question, or did I go?
You did. No, that was
Okay.
beautiful. That was beautiful. Yes, it is. I do hold the belief it does. It does come through the bloodlines. You know, a lot of well-known memes will say there isn't such a thing as just a sprung up medium within a family. It's inherited down. You know, and through my own work, I see it's because of the physical body. When you're going and you're experiencing things with heightened abilities, heightened sensory, the physical body has to be able to hold that energy and that frequency in. And that's why I've seen it's inherited through the family, because there's something within the genetic makeup of the body and that bloodline, again, that can hold space to be able to reach up to higher dimensions and to hold in, because we are dealing with energies that are outside of our 3D perception. And
Right.
so, I always call it, it's that give and take, right? So we go up and then they come down and we meet somewhere in that beautiful wiggle room. And that's where the communication, insight, and all the clairs come into play. Yes. So I want to delve into something. You pinpointed that your mother was persecuted in a past life. Do you have any feelings of that yourself, or do you have any of a sense of clearing that out? I know a lot of mediums and people who practice, they have this sense of needing to clear and heal in this lifetime. Do you share in that?
I guess I could answer this in two different ways. So, from an astrologer's point of view, right? And from an astrologer's point of view, my South Node is in Aquarius. The South Node points to our past lives, the lives that we experienced, the qualities we have innately in us. It's always opposite our North Node, which is our purpose, our destiny, where we kind of push ourselves outside of our comfort zone to reach this sense of purpose and fulfillment, right? So, my South Node happens to be in Aquarius. And it happens to be in the third house, where many communications and many it has been said in readings of me that I did serve the masses in past lives, that I was persecuted for what I said, right? For what I said was the truth. And this is a search for truth and meaning, all of us on our human life, right? We go down different paths. But for me, that past node, that South Node, past life in Aquarius, gift of serving the masses, of being persecuted for what was said, how it was communicated, how it was conveyed, is something that really does resonate with me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's this beautiful. I would like to shift just for a minute, because
Yeah.
it's the word's been brought up about 4 times now.
Mm.
And we're talking about past lives. The word fear.
Hmm.
I would love, almost from an astrology standpoint, if we can,
Yeah.
are you seeing, we're here to, I feel, and I don't know if you share this, there's a lot of souls that are here to clear out and heal. And we're moving past this fear. Have you seen within the astrological numbers that we're moving into a space where fear doesn't really hold space here any longer, that we're able to get out of that cognitive dissonance and be able to see clearly?
Okay, I have so much to say. You opened a can of worms. So just direct me if I'm going down a path that you'd rather steer clear of. But there's a couple ways to look at fear through the lens of astrology. Most traditional astrologers look at Saturn, the planet Saturn. Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma. Saturn is the karma boomerang. What goes around comes around. Saturn provides limitations and restrictions. I describe Saturn in my classes as your military grandfather in the sky, right? They're on time, there's boundaries, there's procedures, you got to put things back where they belong. And yet there's this other very karmic side of Saturn. Now, from a human side, when we feel restricted and in fear, sometimes that doesn't feel so good, right? But really what's going on, it's like, if we take everything away, you get to know really what the nuts and bolts of something is. So if I told you, Abby, you're in art school, this is why you're here in this lifetime, you need to be an artist, but I'm only going to give you the color blue. Have fun. And you're like, no, like I need all the colors. But then you start to understand that you can paint with a little bit more blue and it makes it darker, or you can put a little water in and it makes it lighter blue. And you start to work within your restrictions and your limitations, right? And so Saturn, what I've done with some of the Saturn, I guess that my clients that are going through intensive Saturn cycles, which come in periods of 7, right? You've heard of the Saturn return. That's a full way around the wheel, which is 28 to 30. but people will experience these intense kind of shock waves and realizations around themes about fear in their lives in these 7-year patterns. And you can really pinpoint them. They're very clear in the chart, right? And so when you tell people those dates, it's kind of fun to do some mind blowing. But fear, fear, the acronym is F everything and run, or face everything and rise, right? And so Saturn gives us that boundary, which we need, right? We need some boundaries, and we need the banks of the river in order for the river to flow. So there's a couple of different, I guess, philosophies on fear when it comes to astrology, because you could also be looking at what's hidden, what's unseen. This would be a lot of 12th house stuff. If you see somebody that has a lot of squares to Saturn, right, they're going to have some challenges overcoming some of this fear that's coming up for them. And I mean, does that help a little bit?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Are you seeing a greater number when you're looking at people's astrological charts? Are you seeing patterns within that people are here to be more open, to be more accessible, or are you still seeing a lot of those Saturn blocks within people here?
Well, it just depends on the individual soul's journey and what they're really wanting to do. Saturn is a great piece to be able to do some soul inventory and look at the self and look where I've restricted myself and look what I'm really actually afraid of. And not everybody wants to do that work, and not everybody is here to do that work. And it's really not for everybody. If you look at it from the lens of human design, there's different motivations. My motivation is hope. So I come across as very optimistic, hopeful, Jupiter influence, right? But there are some people whose actual motivation is called fear. And what that does, it's a gift for the tribe of humanity to know what to be aware of, what to be really intelligent about. And so you can start to think of that word fear from a couple of different places. And to try to answer your question more directly, Saturn right now is in the sign of Pisces. It's there for about a 3-year period. And this is really interesting, right? Because Saturn, if you think about rules and regulations, in the sign of Pisces, where there are no rules or regulations, where it's totally spacey, where it's completely nebulous, where it's this beautiful connection of, being the one drop of water, but also a part of the whole ocean. And there's really no separation, and this boundless sense of connection to God, to the goddess, to the divine, right? That's no place for Saturn. So, we have to, as astrologers, think creatively as we're informing people, because, where I look at it, it's like, wow, this is a great time in the timeline of humanity to put in some structures for how we connect psychically, how we connect with the divine. It doesn't mean that we have to be limited by it, but I do think it's a 3-year period where a lot of people are overcoming their Saturn fear of connecting and being more Piscean. Right? See how I made sense?
I do. Yes, yes. I love all your visuals, and I especially love the visual of Saturn with the riverbanks and the
Mhm.
flow. And I mean, I think that flows beautifully into Pisces, because again, that Pisces is that water force. That's that flowing. I always call myself a super Pisces because
Yeah.
my sun, moon, Mars, and Mercury are all in Pisces.
Okay, so like you, I have 4 planets in Scorpio. So I'm a super Scorpio.
Yes, but it's when, just being open to podcasts like this, it's open to the flow of newer information and different perspectives. And we've been going through a lot of retrogrades. And sometimes, a lot of people don't like those, but I think they're great opportunities, because it gives us another chance to look at something again, because it will almost boomerang back into like, all right, I haven't faced this one, I guess, for a while. It's let's deal with this, instead of continually to shove things underneath of the rug.
Right. And as Saturn, it's an outer planet, right? So it has a retrograde period every year for months. So it's not like these shorter Mercury, Venus, Mars retrograde periods that are a little bit more heightened, I was just actually, before we got on the call, I was like, what did I redo or re-recognize or rework or whatever during this last period? And it's a lot, and it's all positive. It's all positive. So
Yeah.
it just depends, I think, on your own perspective, which goes back to our earlier bullet point of magic and synchronicity and starting your day early and setting yourself up for the best possible belief system right? That I'm supported in the dome of protection and provision, that it's okay to relax in this human life and to enjoy this beautiful day, that I have one precious human life, right? And I'm not going to waste it. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that you bring it in, and so often for just all the listeners at home, the women, and I don't want to exclude men from this, but the ones who practice within this magic field,
Mhm.
they bring in such a beautiful capsule around it. I want to say, whenever I'm working with energy and working with someone else, I always set the intention of for your highest good, highest purpose, highest timeline, and working within that heart frequency. And I'm going to now segue into the next question is doing this work, because I know that you work mediumistically, psychically, and astrology. It's that beautiful trifecta. How have you helped? If you could give us a story or example of how you have helped another human, or even just through a class,
Mhm.
through this work.
Okay. Well, that's really sweet. Thank you. For me, what's so rewarding is, again, that thing where you say something and it makes sense and you weren't even aware it was going to hit for somebody. I just got a text this morning, right? Tiffany, I just joined your membership. Our session with the midheaven gave me everything I needed to understand my purpose. I've been struggling with my career for years, and now I feel aligned. Right. What astrology did for me 22 years ago when I started studying is it helped me sink into my own bones and get on my own cosmic highway, right? And it was different than what I thought my plan for my life was going to be. But if you look at the chart, right, if you look at the midheaven, if you look at the north node, if you help somebody see not what their only purpose in life is, but how their purpose is going to play out and shine through them, right? So my midheaven is in Virgo. So what I do is give people practical tidbits of information on how to study these metaphysical topics and esoteric arts, and it's very bite-sized and practical, and that practical magic side comes out, right? And so another one that I love doing that I used to really brace against is a session called Mothering Their Moon. And so I'll work with caregivers, parents, family, to help understand the child that they're raising, which is under a complete different celestial blueprint than they are, right? And we have all this like crap about learning disorders or blah, 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 I could go on. But the idea here is that your Mercury is different than my Mercury. We learn differently, we talk differently. We need that. We need that I guess, diversity of ways to understand and communicate and share information exchange. But if you don't know that your kid is designed completely differently than the way that you operate, you're basically just conditioning them to set them up for failure, right? And so all we really want to do as parents and caregivers of the next generation, all of the adults here, whether you have kids or not, whether you're around kids or not, you're conditioning the next generation just by being yourself and assuming that that's how it's supposed to be for somebody else. It's not. And so you to give somebody in a session that gift of that kind of manual of, hey, the blueprint of my family member or my loved one or my lover or my daughter or my son is different, or my dad or my mom or whoever, it frees you up and you can love yourself and you can appreciate and respect the other, and you can be in your own timeline and start to just everything shifts when you see that, right? So those are a couple that are coming to mind today.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. It's an important subject to talk about. And again, that's a whole other podcast
Yeah.
with parents with these children. I did a session once with a mother, and she had just had a child, and the child came through, and I was talking with the child's higher self, and they were just saying, I work within the number of 3.
Mhm.
And so when the mother said, well, what does that mean? And they're giving me examples of, it might take me 3 tries to get something, or I might have 3 different careers until I find like the third one's going to be what I'm meant to do. It's just their energy moves in a cycle. I don't know why I'm goosebumping up right now, but their energy moves in cycles of 3. And each one of us, we move energy in our own unique, special way. And I think it's so important for parents with their children. You know, I have children, and I know that you have children, is to not, we don't want to muddle our energy into their energy and allow them to work how they work. And it is great to, again, these are all of this esoteric knowledge. It's just tools and things to help us, again, navigate. Just like we talk about Saturn, you know, those river bends, navigating that flow of this soul in this cycle.
Mhm.
And again, this is why we talk about this, because it's just another piece to help us get through. Man, you know what? I really don't want to say get through, because this experience is such a blessing too. So
But there are big ups and downs in life, and we are conditioned to be what we're not. And to me, astrology helps me to be who I am. And the more I am who I am, that is something that people are interested in learning. I want that for myself, right? Like, I want to be as uniquely as designed as I am. And so to me, that's the biggest gift of astrology, is to know yourself. And
yeah,
then everything's okay. If you know yourself and you know how you make decisions in this world, you're fine. That's all you need, you know?
yeah,
And with our kids too, if I empower mine to know who they are, love who they are, and to make decisions in the way that they are astrologically designed to make decisions, there will be no mistakes. They will feel the support of the universe. They will naturally be in correct time, for them. They're drawn to the right people, places, and timelines, just by their own decision-making process.
yeah.
I have a lot of good, juicy medium stories too, but I think we're on the astrology path, so I'll save those for another one.
Well, so what I would love, a lot of our listeners, I would imagine, they, I almost want to feel like you have a rumbling inside of you to know that you have these abilities, but there is this fear. And again, this is, it's burnt witches, because we're looking at our past. There is this fear of shunning, of being judged, of being persecuted. What are some of the things that you have done in this life that have helped you continue on this path? Were you ever shunned? Did you ever experience that? And what did you do in that space, in those moments when it happened?
Mm-hmm. For me, and my spiritual toolkit is a fear inventory. And so if I've experienced moments of, like this ungracious side, right, where I've been jealous or irritable or discontent with what's going on, or I've felt less than, right, that's all me. That's not somebody else making me feel that way. That's all me. So the only work to do is on myself. And sometimes that means to not put myself in situations where I'm not feeling heard, or the message isn't transmitting, you know what I mean? So it's not necessarily about retreating and hiding from those situations, but it's more about, if I'm emotionally disturbed, you bring up shame and fear and things like this. If I'm emotionally disturbed, that is my job 100% to not feel that way. And so for me to not feel that way, I go through my fear inventory, which is a huge process. And I'm happy to share that checklist of questions, because it's a landing page if you want to share it with the listeners. But it's a personal process that I go through. And so, there have been absolutely times where I haven't wanted to wear the crown of, doing astrology or doing mediumship. I still, to this day, I have people like, well, what are you doing? What are you really doing over there? And that's bad. And, you're an unwed mother, and this is the, like, bad work. And I'm like, man, I don't know, but I had a session a couple months ago where somebody contacted me. I do a deep dive session, so it's all astrology, mediumship, all of it. And her dad came through, who was deceased. And, you could say as a medium, like, oh, your dad's going to walk you down the aisle, like, and hope that it's kind of right. And she's like, well, yeah, I am getting married. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to do you one better. I want to give you something that beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your dad is going to be there with you. And he's showing me a sand dollar. And she said, she freaked out. She's crying. I'm crying. I don't know why we're crying yet, right? And she said, last night, we don't live by the coast. Last night, I cleaned out the fireplace, and at the bottom of the fire pit, as we're going through our wedding planning, there's a sand dollar in the bottom of the fire pit. And I'm like, no, no. And so when somebody comes at me with what you're doing is bad and wrong, there's just no way, right? That that was like, for me, her daddy's gonna walk down the aisle with her. That's a gift, right? And it's unbelievable until you have some perfect stranger looking at your sky chart and talking about who's the energy coming through. And what keeps me pure, right, is my devotional practice, the yin, the magic in the morning. And so if I'm connected to spirit and my intention is to be of service, and I know I'm not doing anything wrong, right? Then that's all I really need to go forward. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable when people have mean things to say, especially online, especially people that don't know you, especially people that tell you that you're ungodly, you know? Like that's mean. There's not one of us here that's ungodly. We're all creations, of one love, right? So I feel it's a lot of that opportunity to be brave without being defensive. If I am fixing, arguing, defending, or explaining, the other person isn't going to hear anything I have to say. And I'm not a model of God. I'm not a model of spirit. I'm not a vessel of pure communication if I'm in those defensive, fear, shame, arguing, defending, explaining. So I have to check myself. And if I feel that way, I just have to take a time out. And sometimes my timeouts are longer than other people want them to be. But I know that if my cup isn't full when I'm coming through with, my messages for the world, they're not mine anyways. If I'm not a clear channel, then it's going to be distorted, and that's not going to help anybody out. So, I have a mentor, and we'll text each other, and it's like, I got to get my mind right, and you can change your perspective just like that. But if there is stuff that's stuck because there's so much in your lineage, right, of getting through like all of the fears of hundreds of years, right, of hundreds of years, of thousands of years that are being cleared through you in this special lifetime in the Kali Yuga, right, in the age of yoga, when we're on our way back up towards enlightenment, right, we're in this tiny little moment of time. And so it might not be a comfortable time that we have all chosen to incarnate as that you're producing this beautiful podcast. But it doesn't mean that just because we're going through the fires or that we're feeling discomfort, that we don't have the tools that our people before us didn't have to navigate some of those zones, and there really are zones of genius. There's zones of genius because that's where it's not about perfection isn't about getting everything right. Mother Teresa says it's not about getting everything right. It's about doing everything with great love. And, so if I'm doing everything with great love and I'm still getting hurt feelings about it, it's my work to do. It's not their work to do. And the other one I love is Ram Dass about, what does he say? Just pretend like everyone you meet is God in drag. I mean, you're just going to smile and have a good time with them, right? I don't attract clients that are very skeptical or want to test me. Like because I'm not skeptical. I don't want to test the waters. I'm a believer, and I enjoy the hope and optimism that comes with that. But if my vision if I'm not polishing my own heart regularly, then my vision's going to get clouded and I'm going to go down with it.
Yeah.
That was long-winded. Thanks for your patience.
No, that's great. And I'm going to circle back again, how you said that, you don't get clients that are skeptics because again, that's the energy that you put out. I do the same. I put out an energy intention. I'm not really interested in working with skeptics. I just really am not. As again, super Pisces, I just don't live in that world. And it's the same quote that Pietro, what brought him to his persecution was, as they stated, any money he paid out would magically paid back to him. And again, it's because he understood manifestation, right? He understood through astrology and astronomy and philosophy that the energy we put out, we can call back into us. So why not put out positive, loving energy if you want positive and loving energy in your life?
Yep.
And So now I really want you to talk about, because talking about filling our cups and having tools and being that positive, loving energy. I know that you are facilitating a beautiful retreat down in Mexico. If you could just share that and also share how the listeners can find you and the information, I would love that.
Oh, absolutely. You're sweet. Thank you. Yes, I am so excited about this. The invitation is to join me in Tulum in Mexico in February, the 17th through the 22nd of 2024. Of course, this is astrologically timed. And of course, this is a journey both into the yin, the depths of the cenotes, the deep waters, the subconscious fears that are driving our life, and bringing that out into the ruins, the astrological temples, and solarizing it. So it's a lunar, solar, astrological journey. You'll have beautiful surprise gifts when you arrive in the hotel. It's a eco-chic resort. It's right on the beach. We're going to do yoga in the mornings. The yoga is optional if you want to have coffee on the beach instead. I'm so excited about the food because it's kind of healthy Tex-Mex, which is what I like to eat. But there's lots of great healthy options. After the yoga breakfast, we're going to go on our excursions, do some group work, and then in the afternoons we'll have our one-on-one time. So I have let's say, looked at all of the 2024 astrology. I have a beautiful digital astrology calendar that is accessible to everybody, but I have taken that calendar and imprinted it on the attendees' charts, so I can tell you exactly where the ups and downs are. This isn't to use against yourself. Astrology is never to use against yourself, but if you're looking for some optimal windows, or if you're trying to understand why you've been in a season of grief for X amount of time, when does that end? This too shall pass, but when? Those are the types of questions astrology will answer in the afternoon sessions. And yeah, there's some surprise and delights. You guys can find it at wiseskiescollective.com, or my name, tiffanyharelik.com. And I love taking people out of their comfort zones. Everybody that signed up is awesome, top, just really cool women on their journey. And yeah, it'll be a treat next spring. So thank you.
That's beautiful. And of course, we all know the dates weren't random for any of that.
Yeah.
And because the listeners that are at home, that they're not seeing this, how do you spell to find your website? Can you just spell that out for your name?
Yes, for the Wise Skies Collective is WISESKIES Collective, COLLECTIVE.com. And my name, Tiffany Harelik, TIFFANYHARELIK.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And for everyone who's been listening, we're going to circle back to that trivia question.
Oh my gosh, but I want to guess it. Can I answer it?
Yeah,
No?
what's the guess? Yeah. So what was the witch's mark?
Okay, I love this because I think there's not one answer, but I think one of the marks is this widow's peak.
The widow's peak.
Yeah.
Well, so yes. So the answer is, it's a trick question.
Okay.
Because it was so many things. It was just left up. It was left up to the court of the people of the day that day. And if they couldn't find anything, then they would strip them down, and then they would just touch them on their body until they found a sensitive spot. And then they would say, this is where the mark is. It just hasn't risen yet.
Ooh, creepy.
So
Yeah, who's the real witch in that situation?
Exactly. Exactly.
Did you talk about Helen Duncan in your podcast at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay, let me share briefly, if I may, right?
Yes,
Helen Duncan was a Scottish medium, and she was a physical medium, so not mental medium, but physical. And she would have these seances where ectoplasm would come out, and the cops of the time would come out and try and like bust her seance. And so in so doing, she was imprisoned with the Witchcraft Act. And she, after she got out, she held a seance again. And when you touch a medium when they're going through a physical mediumship experience, the ectoplasm quickly got back into her body, and she experienced third-degree burns and died from that. But because of her life, Winston Churchill is the one who completely did away with all of the Witchcraft Act of 35 or 36. But because of her life and because of Winston Churchill, that is why the Witchcraft Act is no more.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So we have a lot to thank for Helen and a lot to thank for him. I mean, it's a crazy cool history.
Absolutely. You know, we've all played, you know, different people from humanity have played vital roles along this story of burnt witches. And I want to end on this poem. The ashes going higher, the smoke filling the sky. Oh, you didn't see my ancestors coming for me behind. As you light the flame of fear, burning away the inner voice rumbling near. Oh, you thought turning us to dust. We lay in the ground, bearing your lust. But a fire burns in our blood, memories drum through our veins. We are the burnt witches returned, the ones you thought you burned away. But our voices rise together, an echo from a deep place you know. Our hearts, they do not tremble. We've come to awaken and help you grow. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Tiffany. Thank you for all the listeners. We welcome you to research more, delve into this, come with an open heart and open mind. And if you feel the call to join Tiffany in Tulum, go to Wise Skies Collective.
To re-listen to today's episode or to catch any other shows, please go to host Abby Lynn's website at abbylynn.co, where you can also find merchandise and other recordings. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you around the fire for the next one.